I started my first day as a roller coaster operator, feeling a strange mix of excitement and dread. The park was crowded with summer vacationers, families, thrill seekers, kids clutching cotton candy. I remember the sound of the chain lift clicking beneath the coaster cars, the wind rustling through the empty tracks before opening. I stood behind the safety gating, uniform crisp, badge glinting in the midday sun. My assignment: the highest coaster in the park, a towering steel colossus that reached 60 meters into the sky. From the ground, it looked like a serpent of metal twisting toward clouds. From the top, I was told you saw the whole city. When I twisted the control lever and released the train, hearts would pound, harnesses would lock, and screams would echo. Most days it was routine. Check the lap bars, scan the seats, yell all aboard. Then flip the switch and watch them vanish up the hill. But that first day, as I looked into the wide eyes of the riders, something felt different. One girl, no more than 10 years old, gripped the hand of her older brother. She appeared terrified, but determined. Her brother gave her a reassuring nod and a thumbs up. Their train chugged upward, clicks filling the air. I counted the seconds until the drop, 5, 4, 3, then pressed the button that released the cars into gravity. The rush of speed, the screams, the wind, miles per hour whipping past people's faces, was intoxicating. But from my vantage, the operator's booth offered a calm, almost surreal view. I watched the track rush beneath their faces as they looped, twisted, and dipped. I glanced down and saw a mother covering her child's ears, then peering bravely over her shoulders. Another passenger leaned over to snap a selfie with their friend, hair streaming in the wind. The coaster plunged back toward the station, wheels clattering, brakes hissing, and the train rolled to a stop. I opened the gate with a polite wave. Some riders tumbled out laughing, elated. Others stumbled as if in shock. The little girl threw herself into her brother's arms, crying but smiling. I reminded them, "Have a great rest of your day," as they staggered off. Then I turned my attention back to the controls, checking the harness sensors, resetting the loader. It was mechanical, repetitive, but beautiful in its precision. Despite the repetition, something deep inside me clicked. I realized I was not just operating a ride. I was steering humans through a brief moment of terror and joy, suspended between fear and exhilaration. For every person, it meant something different: memories, challenges, victories. Watching them transform from nervous boarding to exhilarated disembarking was oddly moving. I felt like a conductor of emotion. Later that afternoon, the wind picked up as a storm rolled in. Dark clouds loomed. We halted operations briefly when lightning flashed. I retreated to the small booth, heart pounding, not from the ride, but from the raw power of the approaching storm. Outside, the tracks glistened with rain, people scattered beneath umbrellas. I thought everyone up top. Had they finished their ride before we paused? Safe, I hoped. Then came a radio call: "Operator on tower drop. We have a delayed train. Power spike locked the last car on the upper twist turn, 40 meters high." My stomach dropped. A train stuck 40 meters above the ground, riders suspended in mid-drop. The wind whipped around the twisted track. I recall the sickening realization. I had to shut everything down. Evacuate. Authorities needed to come. I stood at the booth window, rain streaming down, staring at the stranded coaster. Minutes crawled. The storm intensified. Thunder rumbled. Inside the booth, the silence felt heavy. My mind raced. Procedures, emergency protocols, crowd control. I key my radio mic, voice steady but urgent. "Emergency team, to tower car. Dispatcher, hold all rides." The park PA crackled, loud enough for passengers waiting in line to hear. Anxiety rippled through the crowds. 20 minutes passed. I watched the rigging crew and technicians climb cages along the track, ladders swinging in the squall. Rain pelted metal and safety nets glistened. I felt powerless and responsible. As lightning flickered over us, I closed my eyes for a moment, breathing deep. The little girl earlier flashed in my mind's eye, the ecstatic laughter. Her tears of fear turned into smiles. Would she be okay up there? Would she still talk about me? I shook my head and returned focus to the radio, tracking updates on the rescue. My feet felt rooted to the spot. My hands gripped the control panel. This was no longer a ride. It was a test of nerves for everyone. The wind howled through the steel bones of the coaster like a warning. The stranded train hung motionless at the curve near the summit, 40 meters above the ground, right where the track twists sharply left before the final drop. I stared up at it, my stomach coiled tight. The emergency lights flashed red across the length of the track, casting jagged reflections in the wet metal. Power car still stable. Rescuers en route, came a voice from my headset. It was maintenance-led Jackson, steady, calm, and sharp as ever. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. The rescue team had begun their climb, harnessed, roped, and soaked. I watched them inching upward along the steel ladders. One false move, and I didn't want to finish the thought. Inside the car, the guests had gone silent, except for one man, C2B, who was shouting. He kept yelling about his rights, demanding to be lowered immediately. I saw a tech near him try to calm him down. I fell for them. Every operator trains for emergencies, but training doesn't replicate standing beneath suspended lives while a storm threatens. I thought again of the little girl from earlier. Was she up there? The manifest showed that particular train had launched at 3:47 p.m. I pulled up the ride logs. Seat 6A, 6B, yes. There she was. Lila, age 10. Her brother in 6B, Dylan, 17. I clenched my jaw. She was one of them. I felt sweat trickling down my back despite the cold. I could imagine her small hands gripping the harness, her body shaking in fear. My fingers hovered over the intercom button, the one that connected directly to the ride speakers. Should I say something? No, not yet. That would just make them more aware of the danger. The rain had lightened to a drizzle, and the wind was slowing. Good. Lightning had moved several miles away. Still, we were under strict orders. No mechanical motion until the all-clear. Operator booth, confirm. All other attractions powered down. I clicked my mic, confirmed. Full shutdown engaged. Visuals show all guests moved to covered zones. Copy. Rescue crew ETA to final car, 2 minutes. The 2 minutes stretched like taffy. I watched the rescue team's yellow suits climb higher, muscles tense against the wind. I remember my first training shift, the safety drills, the stories shared in the break room about coaster stalls and rare mechanical lockups. But this wasn't just theory. It was happening. I heard a girl's voice crackle faintly over the team's shoulder mic. I want to go home. Then a reply. You're safe. Almost there. Just hold on. A minute later, a cheer broke out over the headset. The tech had reached the final row. Harnesses were double-checked. A rope was secured. One by one, guests began being lowered down via the emergency zip system. A slow, careful descent to the rescue netting below. I watched breathlessly. The man from C2B came down first. Loud, cursing, angry, but safe. Then an older woman. Then a pair of teens. Then finally, I saw her. Lila. She was clinging to her brother's arm as they prepared to descend. She looked down, nodded at the rescuer, then stepped off the platform together. Her descent was smooth. She hit the netting, legs shaking. Medics swarmed them. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. 30 minutes later, the last guest had touched ground. The coaster sat eerily quiet, emptied. The storm had passed, leaving only streaks of wet light across the pavement. Cleanup began immediately. Guests were escorted to first aid and given free passes for future visits. I overheard one medic say, "That little girl? Braver than half the adults up there." I walked the edge of the blocked-off area, watching the guests walk away. Most were fine. Some were crying. A few laughed nervously. One kid asked if he could ride again tomorrow. Back in the break room, I sat with a cup of coffee, hands still trembling. My supervisor, Dale, entered. "You held it together," he said quietly. "Not everyone does. You kept the system calm. That matters." I shrugged, still staring at the styrofoam cup. I felt powerless. "You weren't," he said. "You were the ground anchor. You stayed in control. And that means those kids didn't panic. That means people go home safe." I nodded slowly. It was hard to internalize, but I appreciated it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed everything. Each click of the harness, each gust of wind, the face of that little girl. I checked the incident report again. No injuries, no faults, just a rare power surge, an emergency protocol. Still, it felt like a turning point. I wasn't just a ride operator anymore. I was a guardian of seconds, of stories, of people mid-scream, mid-dream. And it was only my first week on the job. After the incident with the storm and the stuck train, the park resumed operations the next day, but something in me had changed. The control panel felt heavier. The safety checks more deliberate. I arrived early, walked the entire coaster track with maintenance, every nut, bolt, and weld. I double-checked every car, inspected every harness lock myself, even though that wasn't technically my job. I needed to know. I needed to see with my own eyes that nothing like yesterday could happen again. Yet, even with all the precautions, the unease didn't leave me. It lurked like a shadow behind the operator booth, always whispering, "What if this time it's worse?" That afternoon, as the sun began to dip behind the food stalls and arcade domes, the crowd thinned. Evening was our slowest period. That's when I met her, Casey. She was in her 20s, alone, standing in line for the coaster. No phone in her hand, no camera, no friends. Just waiting, patient, looking up at the track. When I opened the gate, she stepped in with a quiet smile and took the front seat. "You sure you want front row?" I asked, making conversation. "Always," she replied, eyes still scanning the track. "I like to see what's coming." That line stuck with me. I launched her train, watched as she disappeared up the lift hill, arms folded across her lap, calm and still, as if she were meditating. 3 minutes later, she returned, wind-tousled and smiling, not giggling or shouting like the others, just smiling, like someone who knew something others didn't. When she stepped off, she said, "I think you love this ride more than anyone else here." I blinked. "What makes you say that?" "You check the panel 4 times before every launch," she said with a shrug. "Most operators just do once. You watch every rider leave like it's your responsibility how they land." And then she added, "But sometimes you look scared." I didn't know how to answer that. She walked away. The next few days blurred together. Kids, teens, screams, roller coaster roaring like a dragon across its track. But Casey kept coming back, always alone, always sitting front row, always watching me. On her 5th ride, she asked, "Do you ever ride it yourself?" "No," I said. "Operators aren't supposed to. Liability. But would you?" I hesitated. "If I did, I'd have to sit front row." She smiled at that. Later that evening, she was the last rider on the final run before close. Her train launched as twilight burned across the sky in gold and orange. The track glowed. The park was near silent. But halfway through the ride, on the rear monitor, I saw something odd. The emergency feed flickered. For a second, the camera caught the loop track, but the train wasn't visible. Static. Then, 1 second later, it appeared again, right on track, mid-loop. A camera glitch, probably. Happens sometimes with RF interference. But still, it gave me chills. When Casey's train rolled back in, she stepped out slowly. "Did something happen out there?" I asked. She paused. "Did you see it too?" "What?" She smiled, this time not warmly, not kindly, like she knew I wouldn't understand. Then she left. I checked every camera feed 3 times. Nothing unusual. Logs showed no sensor faults. The ride had gone perfectly, except my instincts didn't agree. The next morning, I filed a maintenance request to inspect every camera node on the loop. Text told me it was likely weatherware, moisture affecting the feed. That would have been the end of it, but I started noticing other things. Empty seats registering as occupied. Safety bars showing unlocked for a split second, then correcting. And worse, passengers coming off the ride claiming they'd seen a man standing at the track edge on the second drop. Security footage showed no such thing. But it kept happening. Same place. Same description. Tall. Pale shirt. Black hair. No one ever saw his face. Casey came again that night. I didn't mention the sightings. I didn't ask what she saw last time. She didn't need prompting. "There's something old in that ride," she said, her eyes locked on mine. "Not in the metal. In the fear." "What do you mean?" She shrugged. Energy collects where people scream. I laughed, nervously. You're telling me it's haunted? She didn't laugh back. I'm telling you, maybe it remembers. That night, I stayed late. Past close. Past protocol. The park empty. Lights dimmed. I walked the coaster track alone, flashlight in hand. The silence was unnatural. No hum of hydraulics. No music. Just the creak of cooling metal. As I reached the second drop, the spot where people reported the man, I felt a shift in the air. Not cold. Not warm. Just different. My flashlight flickered. And for a moment, just a blink, I saw something at the edge of the track. A figure. Still. Watching me. When I turned the beam that way, it was gone. The next morning, I told no one what I saw. Who would believe me? That I saw a man standing at the edge of the second drop, who vanished the moment my flashlight reached him. I convinced myself it was stress, fatigue, my mind playing tricks. I hadn't slept well since the storm incident, but the truth scratched at the back of my thoughts like a persistent itch I couldn't reach. Still, I showed up for my shift like always. Inspected the panel, verified the sensors, double-checked the camera feeds. Everything was normal until it wasn't. Mid-morning, a mother came storming up to the booth, dragging her teenage son by the arm. "You need to check your ride," she shouted, voice shaking. My son saw someone standing on the track. My stomach sank. I looked at the boy, pale, wide-eyed, silent. "Where?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Right before the loop," he whispered. He didn't move, just stared. His eyes were wrong. I called security. I told them it was a false alarm, but to walk the perimeter anyway, just in case. They found nothing, but the reports kept coming. By the end of the week, 7 more guests had described the man. Same build, same pale clothing, same spot. Our head of operations, Lisa, called me in. "You're the senior operator on that ride," she said. "Any clue what's going on?" I wanted to tell her everything, but I didn't. I just shook my head. Could be a prank. Maybe someone slipping into the park. Maybe mass suggestion. She gave me a look. Not suspicious. Concerned. "Take a few days off," she said. "Recharge. Clear your head." I didn't argue, but I didn't go home either. Instead, I visited the archives. Buried in the maintenance building, behind racks of blueprints and rusted ride parts, was a records room no one really used anymore. I found old logs, photographs, staff rosters, faded ink, and paper smelling of time. It took hours, but I found it. A ride incident. From August 4th, 1995. Exactly 30 years ago to the day. A man had been struck by a coaster cart during after-hours maintenance. He wasn't wearing the reflective vest. No one saw him in time. He died on the spot. The report was brief. No name listed. Just a number. Number 1437. And a note. Track cleared. Ride repaired. No further action. I stared at the page until the text blurred. Could it be? Could he be the one people were seeing? I photocopied the report. Took it home. That night, I sat in silence, staring at it, afraid to sleep. Afraid of what dream might come. The next morning, I returned to the park. I wasn't on duty, but I needed to see the track. I walked to the second drop, placed my hand on the cold metal, closed my eyes. "Are you still here?" I whispered. Wind rustled through the trees. No reply. That night, Casey returned. She stood beside me near the entrance, watching the ride loop through its graceful metal arc. "He's getting stronger," she said without preamble. I didn't ask who. She looked at me sideways. "You know, most ghosts are echoes. But some are something else." "Why here?" I asked. "Why this ride?" "Because it's where he ended," she said. "But also where others begin. Every scream, every fear, feeds the memory." I swallowed hard. "What does he want?" Her expression turned solemn. "To be seen." We sat in silence for a moment. The coaster rattled overhead. "Why are you here, Casey?" I asked. "You're not just another thrill seeker." "I used to be," she said. "But I saw him. Years ago, when I was just a kid. I was on this ride with my dad." She looked out across the track. We were in the last row. Just before the loop, I saw him standing there. He stared at me. I screamed, not from the drop. From him. I nodded slowly. "And your dad?" He said he didn't see anything. But he died 2 weeks later. Heart attack. He was 38. My heart pounded. "You think it was connected?" She shrugged. I don't know, but I've felt tied to this place ever since. I looked back at the second drop. We have to do something, I said. We have to stop it. You can't stop something that doesn't know it's still here, she said. But maybe you can help it remember. She reached into her bag and handed me something. A rusted ride badge. Number 1437. I found in the archives, she said. I think it was his. I stared at it, then looked back at the ride. That night, after the park closed, I returned alone. Badge in hand. I climbed the safety ladder to the second drop. Stood exactly where he'd been seen. And I waited. I stood at the edge of the track, 40 meters up, wind brushing against my face like a breath from another world. The badge, rusted, heavy, hung from my fingers. Number 1437. The man no one remembered. The operator who never left. I didn't know what I expected. A voice? A gust of wind? A figure appearing like smoke? But at first, nothing. Just the hum of the city beyond the gates. The metallic groan of cooling steel. Then, without sound or movement, I felt it. Pressure. Not on my body, but on the air itself. Like something had joined me. I turned, and he was there, standing at the far edge of the track. He looked ordinary. Work boots, pale shirt, grease-streaked pants, just like I wore on my first day. His face was not angry or frightening. It was tired, lost. I found this, I said, holding the badge out. Is it yours? He didn't move. I work your shift now, I added. Same post, same panel, same passengers. Still nothing. I saw the report. I continued. You died here. They didn't even put your name on it. Just a number. His eyes lifted slowly, locking on mine. And then I heard it. Not with my ears. With something deeper. I didn't want to leave. My chest tightened. Then maybe, I said softly, you don't have to. I stepped forward, holding out the badge like an offering. I'll remember you. He blinked slowly. The wind picked up. Not harsh, gentle, warm. Like a sigh. And then, he was gone. No flash. No scream. Just absence. I stood there for another minute, breathing, then descended the ladder and walked the track back to the operator booth. The next day, I came in early. The panel felt lighter under my hands. No camera glitches. No sensor spikes. No reports of strange figures. Casey came to ride again. She sat front row, as always. When she stepped off, she didn't say anything. Just gave me a small nod, as if to say, you did it. I never saw her again after that. A week passed, then a month. Things returned to normal. Almost. Because I wasn't the same. I began to understand that being a ride operator wasn't just about safety bars and switches. It was about presence, about guardianship, about honoring the souls, living or lost, that passed through this place. I placed the badge, hashtag 1437, inside a shadow box next to the operator station. No plaque, no explanation, just a silent promise. Someone remembers. Now, sometimes late at night, when the ride is empty and the wind is still, I swear I can feel him. Not watching, not haunting, just standing with me, where he always stood, where he belonged. One evening, a new trainee asked me, is it true? The stories about the ghost. I looked at him and smiled. There are no ghosts here, I said. Only memories. He laughed. That's comforting. But I wasn't joking, because the ride moves on. But some riders never leave. And some operators never truly clock out.